Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I'm also the owner of Velvet Bride, which is a bridal boutique here in Missoula, Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So today's video, we are in the shop, we are talking about wedding dresses, and specifically popular types of fabrics when it comes to wedding dresses. So if you've been wedding dress shopping already, you've probably experienced that there are a lot of different types of fabrics. And if you have not been wedding dress shopping, maybe you've seen a lot of different photos, or you've just heard from other friends or just people in general that there are a lot of different types of fabrics when it comes to wedding dresses, and maybe this makes you feel a little bit overwhelmed and you have no idea where to even go, where to start when it comes to wedding dress shopping and what kind of fabric you might want in your wedding dress. So we're going to talk about the most popular types of wedding dress fabrics and a little bit of the pros and cons of each one. So when it comes to wedding dress fabrics, there's a pretty large variety and array of fabrics. So today we're just going to talk about the most common and the most popular wedding dress fabrics. And that is tulle, chiffon, satin, crepe, mikado, lace, Dupion, and organza. So first let's start with tulle. So tulle is a sheer and gauzy material, kind of similar to what you might think a tutu is made out of. There are a lot, that's a little bit more of a coarser tulle. A lot of tulle that you'll find in wedding dresses is more of a silk tulle, so it'll be a little bit softer and not quite as stiff. Let me show you an example. So when I say sheer and gauzy, that is what I mean by this material. So this skirt here, this is a tulle skirt, and I know in a camera you probably can't see the details all that well, but just to give you an idea, this is a tulle skirt typically found in flowier styles. This is an A-line, so it's not a fitted skirt. Gives a lot of movement and just a lightweight, sheer, gauzy, this is what it looks like up close. So you can kind of see a little bit of that texture, and kind of similar to like a netting. Pros of this is, again, very lightweight, very airy, good movement. A con is this can snag fairly easily. Another point of note is if you are getting married outside, not only can it snag on items, but the edge, so the end of this is just a raw tulle hem. If you are walking through, if your aisle is going to have, if it's not paved, if it's not a finished aisle, if it's going to have any kind of like pieces of bark or sticks or anything like that, they will likely get caught in tulle. So that's just something to keep in mind when it comes to tulle fabric. The next fabric we're going to talk about is chiffon, which is another fairly popular fabric. I don't have a ton of chiffon dresses in here. That is something that was a more popular fabric for our bridesmaid styles. But chiffon is, again, a very lightweight fabric, often found in more of an overlay in kind of a top layer of a skirt, as it is, again, pretty sheer and see-through. So in this particular gown, the bodice is beaded and lace, and it does have some illusion tulle, but the skirt is a chiffon. So shape-wise, kind of similar to the dress that we just showed with the tulle. It does have a flowier skirt on the bottom. However, this fabric is more of a solid weave as opposed to the tulle. So while it is still light and transparent, and I'll show you if I can grab hold of it here, it is transparent when held up to the light. So you can see here, you can see right through it, but rather than it being that kind of netting, open weave look, it is more of a solid weave while still being transparent. So very common for summer wedding gowns, as it is very light and flowy, great in that purpose. But again, a con is that it can be fairly delicate and can snag easily, just like tulle. Next up, we have organza, which is fairly similar to chiffon. It's just a little bit thicker. So this is something that you may not be able to tell just from a video, but as you're trying on gowns, you will be able to tell by the feel. So looks-wise, this looks fairly similar to chiffon. Perhaps you can hear it. It's a little bit crisper, a little bit crunchier, a little stiffer, offers a little bit more structure than chiffon. It does still have a similar flow, but it is a little bit heavier and a little bit more coarse than a chiffon. As you can see here, this is ball gown. Organza is pretty common when it comes to ball gowns and fuller skirts, as it does have a little bit more of that thicker structured look, so it's great at adding fullness to wedding gowns. Okay, next up is one of my personal favorites, and that is satin. You might be pretty familiar with satin, as we do see this in other non-bridal attire, fairly common these days. But something that is often confused and good to know is, so satin refers to the finish of the fabric and not the fabric itself. So satin basically means that it has a shiny finish. Most commonly, this is silk. So silk is the fabric that has the satin finish. And a lot of dresses you will have a silk satin, but just because it is satin does not mean that it is silk. It might be a polyester fabric. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you're looking for a satin gown, silk satin is going to be on the higher end price point wise, but if you like the look of that silk satin but don't want to be spending that much money, there are polyester blends that do have a satin finish, so you can have a similar look without having it be fully silk, which is going to be a little bit more expensive. I'll show you the difference here. So here's two different satin gowns. This one here is a silk satin, and this one is a satin blend. So it's a stretch satin. It's kind of like a blend between a crepe and a satin, which we'll get to crepe here shortly, but it's a slightly more matte than this one. Perhaps if I scoot back, you can tell a little bit better. So again, this one's the silk satin. It has much more of a sheen to it, and more of a shine on the fabric. Very soft to the touch, very comfortable. And this is the satin blend. So still has a sheen to it. Still very soft and comfortable, but it does have a blend, so it's not quite as shiny as the pure silk gown is. Satin gowns do offer a little bit more of an elegant feel. They can really dress up a gown while still keeping it fairly simple, and they can really be great for a lot of different types of seasons and different weather climates. The one slightly negative or con to a silk or satin fabric is it can be less forgiving than other fabrics. So then we have Mikado, which is basically a thicker, more structured satin. So this would be considered Mikado. It is, again, still you have that shiny satin sheen to it, but it is much, much thicker. You don't have quite as much of that buttery soft feel as you do with a satin or a silk satin. And you can see just kind of to the touch, it's a little bit louder, it's coarser. You can see just how much thicker this is from just a plain satin. So very common in more structured gowns. This is a trumpet, very fitted, very structured gown with an off-the-shoulder sleeve, which you can see that this sits pretty well and holds its structure pretty well just by being that Mikado fabric with the off-the-shoulder. This is a very versatile fabric, again, great in a lot of different types of seasons, weather, climates. However, it can be thicker, which means heavier and warmer in those warm weather months. So Dupion is another fabric that unfortunately I don't currently have any gowns in Dupion in store, but it's kind of similar to an organza, but a little bit thicker. And while I don't have something to show you, I'll see if I can find an image of a gown in Dupion so that you can at least get an idea of what that fabric kind of does to a dress, as it is a little bit more, it's made up of more coarse fibers, again, very common in larger, fuller skirts and ball gowns, as it does hold that structure pretty well and is great at adding volume. Dupion can be a little bit more on the pricier side as well. Next is another personal favorite, and that is crepe. This is very, very common in the more minimalistic, kind of simple, elegant style we have seen become more and more popular over the last couple of years. So crepe is just a very simple, nothing to it. It's a matte fabric, very soft, very comfortable, typically has a decent amount of stretch in it too. So it's typically found in more fitted silhouettes, as it does tend to hug the body more than other fabrics and will really show off those curves and the shape of the dress. And finally, we have lace, which is probably the most common fabric when it comes to wedding dresses and the most common throughout the years. So lace wedding dress, you probably know what that means, and there are, when it comes to a lace wedding dress, that's kind of the overhead category, and then there are so many subcategories when it comes to the type of lace and the structure of the lace and the overall feel and weight, and there's just so many varieties of lace that we could do a whole video just on lace dresses. So lace just encompasses when you have any type of lace pattern. So this particular dress actually has a couple different kinds of lace, which is why I wanted to show you this one. So the outer layer is a much thicker, more of an embroidered lace on the outside, but then it actually has a lining lace underneath, which is what we refer to as chantilly lace, as it's a much more delicate, softer, thinner lined, pull it out here, this one here. Oh, it's connected. This lace right here is what we would refer to as chantilly. It is much more delicate, a lot thinner lines like I said, and different from the outer layer that is this thicker embroidered lace over the top. So those are two very common types of lace. You might also see something that is called damask, brocade, or jacquard, which is kind of similar to lace, but it's a little bit more of a different type of lace and more detailed. So damask and brocade are fairly similar, and they're basically a different kind of lace. They're not necessarily lace, or it's a kind of type, the way that the lace is created, if that makes sense. So brocade is basically when you have a raised jacquard design, which we have on this gown here. So you can see, how well can you see? There is a floral pattern that goes over the entire gown. So from back here, it doesn't look like there's anything on it. It's very subtle, but it does have a raised kind of embossed look, and that is what we refer to as a jacquard design. So this is a brocade, and if you were to run your hands over it, it feels, you can tell that it is raised and embossed here. Similarly, damask is very similar, but it is a lighter weight. So it doesn't have quite as much raise as the jacquard design does, and it's all a little bit of a lighter weight. You can see through it a little bit more. So with the mask, you do kind of have, typically it's a pattern all over the top that is the same color as the base layer. So you can see here when I pull this away, let's see, when I pull it away, it looks like this is a sheer transparent layer, and then it has the same color underneath, so that you just have this all over same pattern, very, very subtle pattern that you can't really see unless you have it pulled away from the base layer. So that's what's referred to as damask. And one more lace kind of variety you might see that has been more popular lately is a Swiss dot. Basically just polka dots. So it's typically on a muslin or tulle fabric, which is what this sleeve is, a Swiss dot here, and it has just evenly spaced out dotted material all across it. So you can see basically it just looks like polka dots. This is what we refer to as Swiss dot. So there you have it. Those are the most common fabrics when it comes to wedding dresses. Hopefully this will make things a little bit clearer for you. Maybe you have a better idea of what you are looking for in a wedding dress. I would love to hear what your favorite types of fabrics are. If you found your wedding dress, what type of fabric it was, or maybe was that the reason you picked it. I love talking about wedding dresses and wedding dress shopping. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.